That's the only other one I ever remember being this close. It's amazing.
Well, I know we better not listen to posters anymore.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Ever, ever.
Ever.
Turn off your TV.
Right.
And IT, they just put us up on YouTube, so we should be good to go. We're just waiting on council members of Helen Waring, but we do have a quorum.
Oh, great. Well, we'll give them one more minute and see if they show up. That would be fine. Yeah, I went to bed about 11:30, just figuring we weren't going to know much until the wee hours or even morning, if then. So
Right.
I think that was a good decision.
I think our sons didn't go to bed till like 4 o'clock last night, Mayor. They both were preoccupied.
They're younger. They can still all-nighters and keep going the next day. I used to be able to do that, but not lately. All right, let's go ahead and get started if we can, if we will, and ask you to join me for a moment of silence. I'm going to ask us to reflect on all those who ran for public office and those who helped make the elections possible, with the thought that, everyone who was a candidate was offering themselves for public service. And so no matter what the outcome, winners, losers, or draw, that was the good intention of all those people, no matter what their party was serving our citizens and our public. And I ask we keep that in mind now and going forward. Amen. So bless them.
Amen.
Bless them all for running. I can say that. So we basically have just two budget areas. We went over the stormwater at the last meeting, but I think we had some discussion about the stormwater fee that Amy wanted to follow up with us about. And then our tourism budgets, we really haven't talked about those yet for next year, the accommodations and hospitality budgets. So Amy, I presume you're out there.
I am out here. We're going to go over stormwater budget first, and Matt actually is going to go over that with you, and I will stop sharing my screen so he can share his.
Great, sounds good.
All right, let's see. Hopefully that's up and functional. So we did have some questions at the last meeting about the stormwater fee and basically what were comparison fees in other jurisdictions, and also how was kind of the fee used, and what were some options for additional expenditures if more fee revenue were to come in. So briefly, let's run through some stormwater utility data, specifically talk about the stormwater utility fee, give some of those comparisons for other utilities and what their fees are, and then allocation needs in the department if we were to raise additional fees. So this data is from the 2019 Southeast Stormwater Association Stormwater Utility Report. They do a annual or a semi-annual or biannual survey of their membership. So it's about 136 jurisdictions that report. You can see that stormwater departments are set up very different to stormwater utilities in many different jurisdictions. About 20% of them have a separate stormwater department like we do. But you're going to see it more often combined with other departments. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at fees, that many other departments are able to kind of piggyback their costs, let's say, through the general fund with being a membership group in another department. Budget-wise, down below, you do see kind of how stormwater utility fees are used. They're generally predominantly used in operations and maintenance costs, but obviously also the mandatory regulatory side of MS4 permit compliance, public education information, those are EPA requirements for your utility generally, admin overhead. Then there is generally some expenditure on technical and capital improvement plan work, which in this case is showing about a combination about 26%. So just some kind of framework and reference for what the city does with its its fee versus what some of the other jurisdictions are doing. It's always hard to get apple to apples comparison on these, but the city has approximately 4.1 million feet of pipe and ditch system that we maintain. We do obviously have a series of marsh and wetland outfalls, which are generally challenging from a maintenance cost perspective. We're also, as all of you are more than aware, one of the older cities in the country. So we have somewhat older infrastructure, especially in the peninsula area with our brick arches and our vitrified clay pipe drainage system. And then we do operate and maintain pump stations, which is somewhat unusual. We do also do project work. We run the $1 million small project allocation. All of our management expenses for our large capital projects are in our utility fee. Just showing here 3 years of projected capital improvement plan costing for stormwater projects, averaging out to around $50 million per year. Run our check valve program, emergency response work for hurricanes and things, pump station outfits, and then obviously the regulatory program. The MS4 program, that's normal. That's sort of the core part of a utility generally. The floodplain program is actually very rare to have in a stormwater department. That's typically in a building inspections department. The city is a little bit different again in that half of our city is in a floodplain, so it gets folded into the drainage considerations much more than you would see in a traditional city. That's why we have it set up that way at this city. So getting into the fee comparisons, now we have some background. Local, Charleston County and the city of North Charleston are sitting at about $6 per month. In parentheses, is sort of the total revenue those entities are raising. So North Charleston's a kind of a good local comparison. So a little more than half the fee that we charge for a little less than half the revenue that we receive. So about very similar revenue to fee in that city, but obviously slightly less in the way of drainage challenges, marsh impacts, and historic city age or capital improvement work towards drainage improvements. Going across the state, so trying to find some representative cities that deal with some similar challenges to us, but also there are some of similar size with different challenges, just trying to give a smattering. There are certainly a number of smaller entities and smaller cities that have much lower fees, but don't have much stormwater function outside of like a minimal regulatory basis. So these are not meant to be averages, they're meant to be more representative. Town of Bluffton has a varying fee that varies anywhere from $6 to $13. It can actually go above $13, but it's less typical. That's based on the amount of impervious area you have in your residential property. So like larger residential properties are charged higher fees. It's also based on the gross acreage of your property. So a larger property is also charged a higher fee. Hilton Head, they're at $12.50, raising about $5 million a year. City of Columbia is $11.80. North Myrtle Beach is at $8, raising $3 million. Then City of Greenville, which has certainly a different set of flood challenges than us, more river issues and not the same level of flooding, but they're at $6, similar to Charleston County and North Charleston, raising about $6 million. So moving into the region, the first two are Florida cities. Florida, some of their kind of more prosperous focal coastal cities do have higher rates. You generally see higher stormwater rates there. They have a history of dealing with a lot of stormwater issues in that state. So Naples kind of being a somewhat similar city to Charleston in some ways. Virginia Beach and Norfolk being kind of representative cities we look at in Virginia, being similar to Charleston at those rates. Chattanooga is a little bit different. They're a river-based city again, but they're one that's a very progressive stormwater city for the Southeast. So they're raising about $19 million off of their fee of $10.54. Charlotte being, again, a city that we're all familiar with, slightly lower rate, but again, a very high impervious area in Charlotte. So raising $71 million off of their stormwater fee. And then Wilmington, similar coastal city, similar flood challenges, not quite the same age as Charleston, $8 and $7.4 million. So kind of some quick comparisons.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
This is Peter Shea. Go by that screen just one more second.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe I just missed it, but the Charleston County, North Charleston, and then Greenville, they have various amount that they raise using the same rate. And what is that? Can you explain that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's based on how many properties are being charged the rate from a residential perspective, as well as how much impervious area they have on their non-residential properties. So you're going to see, if you had twice as many residential properties, you would raise twice as much money even with the same
Okay.
residential rate.
Got it.
Yeah, and
Makes
that's
perfect sense.
the main area you're going to see that kind of impact is things like Charlotte, where you're going to have like a very impervious downtown with a lot of commercial properties. So they're going to have a lot of rate payers in that area, even though the residential properties may be more similar.
Yeah, you look at Charlotte, they reaching 71 million, then Chattanooga's 19 million, and that's a big jump from what we're bringing in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And everyone does slightly different things with their utilities, and everyone has slightly different needs, but it's just trying to give a sense of what some of the larger, more progressive stormwater programs are doing.
Thank you,
So
sir.
allocation needs, again, if we did raise additional fee revenue, looking at what could we do with that. And so we talked a little bit about the last meeting about kind of building the project pipeline of trying to add more money into the project work. So coming back with an approach to do that, right now we have sort of our $1 million small project allocation. That allocation, as you're all aware, kind of gets used for a number of different types of needs we have for project work. Because right now we have either small project allocation or full scale drainage fund capital project funding. And there's not a lot of kind of intermediary. So right now the small project gets used for concept work, it gets used for kind of preliminary engineering and engineering work, and it gets used for actual implementation and construction style work. So we've looked at, one of the options would be to try to branch that out somewhat to kind of clean up our project pipeline. And the pipeline here is, not to get into like incredible detail, but small projects take about a year to move through design and completion. Large scale projects take anywhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on how large the project is. So we have a series of currently allocated projects that we are either in design and mostly nearing completion of design, or just getting ready to start construction or in construction on. So we have a really good allocation, as you saw in the kind of the spend for the next 2 to 3 years, but we don't really have the next set of projects beyond that time period. So we certainly have some that will continue, low battery. Some of the other projects are longer time frame projects, but the majority of our CIP, as you would expect, is in that 3 to 5 year window. So part of what you need to do is to start laying out your concept plans and your engineering work for the next set of projects. So you don't basically get 4 years from now and say, okay, we've built everything that we had budgeted. Now what do we do? And then it's another 3 to 4 years until you can build anything again, because you've got to move through that process. So concept plans are important. You need to basically look at, small expenditures to do enough engineering work to figure out kind of what is the cost benefit, what are the scoring metrics to be able to prioritize projects, to be able to look at moving them forward in the process. And this is a inverted pyramid, because not all concept plans move to the next stage. Some concepts you decide after doing the research work, this just doesn't score well enough to move forward until there's additional funding. It might take longer. It might never get funded. You try to avoid the never get funded. You try to just focus on projects you think have success, but it does happen. Then you have engineering. Obviously, engineering can be anything from preliminary engineering work to more complex engineering work. But we kind of have a good example here with projects like Central Park, projects like Broad and Lockwood, where we know that these are projects we want to move forward with, but we don't have kind of full scale capital project drainage fund funding for them. So they're sort of falling into that gap a little bit again between our concept plan work and our construction level work. This is a methodology to be able to move projects like that forward and keep the pipeline moving, keep those projects moving towards construction. And then implementation, because you also don't want to lose track of kind of the original intent of the small project allocation system, which was to say, hey, some of these are just short time frame, relatively construction approachable projects, like installing new outfall pipes, improving existing drainage easements. That still needs to have a setup. And the idea here is to say, here's something we think would be appropriate for this coming year, for 2021, but these numbers could be adjusted each year based on how many concepts we have, how much engineering need we have, and then how many projects are ready for implementation. It doesn't have to be a fixed rate, but this is getting a way to assess. This is about $850,000 of additional expenditures to kind of, again, build this project pipeline, smooth out project delivery cash flow. And it's also the preparatory work for bonding. We've had a discussion about potentially going out for another stormwater bond with the low interest rates. You need to have that project pipeline and cash flow projection in order to know where your bonding needs are, what your bonding costs are, and how to assess that from basically like a cash flow application basis to smooth out that cash flow curve. So the other money, of course, that was only 150,000. The other money that would need to go in is to expand the work capacity, be able to handle that additional work. The first item here, and I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, is to basically promote 3 practice leads. This would be moving to having almost a kind of a secondary management level in the department, a project practice leader, a regulatory practice leader, and an operations practice leader. Right now I'm somewhat becoming the bottleneck for the department a lot of the time, in that I'm managing projects. I'm also doing the council work, overseeing some of the field operations work. This is trying to kind of free up a little bit of more capacity on my end and also on the project end. But it also builds a career pathway, right? It gives a chance for advancement. It gives a chance for people to stay and retain really high quality people because they see that pathway up through the city. And it's somewhat mimicking what you see in like a more consulting methodology, where you want in a technical field like stormwater, you want your kind of senior management to stay technically current. It's probably a good corollary with the phone call for like attorneys, right? You don't need your managing attorneys to not understand kind of current case law. They need to still understand kind of how the law works in order to assign work and manage project work and manage the other attorneys. So practice leaders are still engaged on a day-to-day basis. They don't become pure managers. They're still majority work-oriented leaders, but they're also providing some of that managerial and kind of cross-pollination between the different groups. The second bullet is one that I personally think is incredibly important. This is kind of enhancing our field operations work. The department was really created to provide basically enhanced vegetation maintenance. I mean, we do a lot of grass cutting, we do a lot of weed whacking, we do some very basic repairs of the drainage system. It really had been a reactive department to kind of do a lot of aesthetic maintenance and kind of, basic drainage maintenance. I think we've done a great job, and our new field operations superintendent, Kendrick Swinton, has done a great job adding to that skill set, as well as our 2 deputies, Luigi and Stephanie, have done a great job adding to that skill set and getting us into proactive drainage maintenance. But we need to really continue that by implementing our kind of a true career skill set pathway, whereas people come in, they actually get trained up and they learn how to operate and they learn how to run equipment. And we need to adjust our existing positions to match those needs, that we're not just cutting grass anymore. We're actually trying to improve drainage for everyone and get the system to function at its original design capacity, that rehabilitation. That also builds in some of the kind of lower effort construction work, where we can do that in-house instead of having to always hire contractors at kind of high rates to do relatively basic work. I'd like to do this organically, and I think we can do it for no cost by just kind of rearranging the existing department positions that we have. But it's something that I've been talking about with our superintendent for a long time, and he's a strong supporter of really remembering that there's an incredible value in the people who are actually out doing all of the work in the department, not just the projects, which kind of get the quick and obvious attention. But really, we only need projects when things go wrong from a maintenance and regulatory standpoint generally. So the last one there would be to increase project efficiency. Again, we're doing $50 million a year of project work. We are, with the new position we're adding in, we'll be able to just barely have the capacity to manage the existing number of projects we have. But that assumes no perturbations, right? It assumes no one retires. It assumes no one quits. It assumes no one gets sick or pregnant or any of the other things that generally create challenges for us. In many groups, you would say, well, that'll just slow things down. That'll just, kind of flex the way we do work. At $50 million a year, it's just important to remember, if you have a 1% impact to your efficiency, you lose $500,000. So it's something that's worth building a little resiliency in. At this point, we'd ask for a junior project manager at a slightly lower pay rate to also provide some of that career pathing again, to be able to basically, as people eventually retire or move on to other jobs, be able to keep promoting people up through the ranks and training them into kind of the specifics of doing capital project management and stormwater in somewhere like the Low Country. So again, I think that's a relatively low cost way to really avoid that disruption. And again, right now, the gap filler right now is me. So when we have problems or when someone's on vacation, I'm the one stepping in and managing, which isn't always the most efficient from a long-term perspective. And that gets harder and harder the more work we add, that my span of control is getting a little bit outside of my ability to make that work as well. So that's kind of what I had today. Just wanted to keep it relatively short and let you know where we would go with an extra $1 fee increase if we were to take that route, and sort of what the comparison fees are in the area and what those fees are typically used for. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Matt? Mr.
Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the, sort of the combination of overview and drilling down into how you're budgeting. And I really appreciate the goals that you're setting for the career track, as you call it, and being able to promote from inside and train people into the skills that, are vital, especially in the low country location where we are. Because if you're in the mountains, you don't know a thing about flatland and Tidal Creek. So I appreciate all of that philosophy put into best practice mode. If we were to agree that we want to have that next round of projects teed up for when we finish the 2 and 3 years out that you said we're currently, prioritizing and have authorized, I assume, do you have a short list of the next tier or the next, phase of projects that would kick off in another 3 years? So that we could start to see that kind of, reactive chain. I think we'd all be encouraged to know that you've been thinking ahead for the concerns that we hear regularly, but don't really have a handle for how to solve it. So.
Yeah, it's a good question, Councilman. I think part of that is the concept plan funding is to try to lay those projects out in more detail. We certainly have identified some things, like we have, and I'm just giving a few examples, but we've talked about projects like the potential pump stations downtown for Calhoun Street, the Veterans Administration's property, the Alberta Long Lake. We've talked about the brick arch rehabilitation work and expanding that out into other brick arch systems. But we've also looked at projects outside of that. So we've looked at Long Branch Creek and trying to restore Long Branch Creek and provide flood benefits to Lake Dotterer and kind of the whole Long Branch Creek neighborhood. We've looked at the St. Andrews Basin in West Ashley as a potential project area. We're starting a little bit on concept plan work now from this year's project allocation for the Dowden area in West Ashley, also in kind of the West Pawnee neighborhood. Also obviously in Church Creek, we still have other areas beyond the existing flood storage project that we're looking at that we want to kind of see how we can expand out and do that type of work. But then Johns Island, we're just starting our Johns Island plan with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to identify all of the project areas on Johns Island that might benefit from restoration and enhancement. And then James Island, obviously we have some short-term projects in areas like Shoreham, Willowwalk we want to work on. We have the Dills Bluff project coming off of Camp Road with the town of James Island that we've looked at. We have the Howell side of the Central Park Basin that we really have some general ideas at that the county's been looking at. And then you get into the engineering budget here where we're not just looking at concept plan, but we're starting to get into engineering options on projects that are sort of stuck in that gap. And that's where we're starting to look at like Central Park, right, where we know we need some additional funding. We've looked at the same thing with DuPont Wapu. We actually have that coming to council on Tuesday for small project allocation consideration. Again, to be able to keep these projects that we know we need to build moving forward, so we're not kind of stuck waiting for funding. Because again, many of these have multi-year permitting processes associated with them. So once you get the funding, you kind of want to be able to have those permits in hand for construction rather than sitting waiting for the entire kind of somewhat arbitrary pot of funding, since you don't know your exact construction cost till you have that design and permit work. Then saying, okay, now that we have $8 million, we're going to need 2 or 3 years before we can actually use it to build anything. Mm-hmm. So that's trying to build that whole pipeline. But those are some quick example projects, and we're happy to bring those up in more detail. We will be certainly at the beginning of 2021 for project allocation consideration by the Public Works Utilities Committee. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I mean, that gives us a wide variety and sort of, an opportunity to appreciate that you have been looking at things beyond what you can already, be authorized to do. So thank you.
Councilmember Waring.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Matt, the amount of money that we set aside, I thought it was about $1 million or so for small projects in 2020 20. How did that work out? I mean, now we toward the end. I mean, we had the different little emergency projects that would, surprise us and pop up. I mean, was that not enough? Was it sufficient?
Yeah, it's a good question, Councilman. So it's I think for 2020, we were generally okay in that it was the first year we'd had that type of allocation. So we were kind of building the projects into it. I think it's going to be not enough for 2021 with all of the ideas that are present. We especially start to fall into the gap a little bit on some of these engineering projects like we've talked about. We have between Central Park, between Broad and Lockwood, we have projects that are kind of ready to keep moving, similar to what we're doing in DuPont Wapu with this year's budget.
Right.
But I don't know if there'll be suitable budget for next year to do those things, as well as also building the projects that we want to build and continue with from a small project perspective. So it's a little bit of fluctuation, but yeah, all this money doesn't necessarily come in on day one. It comes in phased out over the course of the year. So we'll be in a good position as we continue working through the year, just like we are this year, to keep expending that money as it comes in.
So have you accounted for that for 21 budget?
So 2021's, we set our base budget assuming that $1 million because we didn't want to assume a fee increase without actually having a fee increase.
Right.
But we certainly have, as a result, we're going to have tough decisions to make at Public Works Utilities on which projects move forward, because there will be many more good projects than there are funds available for those projects.
Right. Yeah, so I was thinking, in addition to what you said here, I mean, very appropriately, I think that what we did, what you suggested a year ago, has worked very well. And the thing about it, these are brick arches and whatnot, they cave in at their own will. Sometimes we now get help from CWS, but more often than not, obviously falls on us. And budgeting for that, budgeting an amount for some of these smaller projects, I just thought it was so successful. Like, whatever we got to do to keep that going, or maybe add a few more bucks to it, I think we should do it.
Councilmember Seekings?
Just thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really quickly to Councilmember Waring's comments. I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday we had a brick arch collapse right at the corner of Washington and Calhoun Street. And they're out there in force today addressing it. So I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. And I agree with you. Anything we can do to sort of plan ahead and give Matt some discretion and have monies available so he can attack this stuff quickly without having to come back to City Council to get approval. Because they're going to get more and more expensive.
I agree. So Matt, if you took that in the, I mean, you didn't know that question was coming, but I think we ought to prepare for that, in 21.
Absolutely.
So I have a question, and this might be more for Susan than for Matt. Susan, you're online. I see your name out there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and I use this example, the drainage basin around the medical district has some real serious needs over there. And in fact, our members of the district, the MUSC, Roper, and the veterans, they're interested in helping us address some of these infrastructure needs over there. But to be honest with you, we don't have a good way to involve them financially. The VA is part of the federal government, and Roper's a nonprofit. So they don't, it's particularly for the VA, it's hard for them to get approval from the federal government just to chip in $50,000 for a project, So would it be possible if you, and I know, I guess you could do a separate special assessment district or something like that, but could you do a delineation, differentiation of the stormwater fees for a specific drainage basin or project area where the property owners within that district pay, rather than $10 a month, they pay $12 a month, just narrowing it down to a specific area?
Mayor, I have to say, I would need to look at that. I think we could structure that some way to set up a district that would authorize that fee for that particular district, if we could justify it, which it sounds like we could. So I would need to look at it a little bit further, but I would think we could come up with some sort of creative solution to do that. And I see Councilmember Jackson shaking her head and Councilmember Appel raising his hand. So hopefully they agree.
Yeah, I think so. And in this case of the hospital district, I know the main property owners, they want to participate, so it's not like we're forcing something on them. But anyway, if you look at that both from a stormwater fee or other special assessment district, that would be a good tool for us. In the meantime, I know, as Matt said, that we probably never have enough money to do all the projects we want to do. It seems to me that the show us that other slide you had, Matt, for kind of in-house departmental expenses right there. So you're saying that would be $130,000 that you would use if you had some more funding to expand your capacity within the department?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
So if we added $1 to the fee for next year and that generated, how much would that generate, Amy?
It's approximately $1 million.
It's approximately $1 million. And so that if you spent 130 of it to expand your needs, and until we needed bonding allocation, you'd have another, 850,000 or so to add to small projects and or emergencies, or just start reserving for future projects as you build your pipeline. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was trying to show, I guess, with the inverted pyramid here of adding roughly 350,000 in for concept plans, 500,000 in for engineering, and that would leave untouched the full $1 million for actual implementation of projects.
Oh, I got you. So there's the 850. I got you.
You're exactly right, Mayor. That's exactly what that would leave, is that money being available for project work.
And the implementation, of course, is already in the budget. So $1 million. Gotcha.
And part of that is, right now what we do, Mayor, is that the implementation, we have $1 million, but it does get used for concept work and for engineering work. So to some extent, it also would restore the full $1 million for implementation.
For real work.
Well, my project managers would say it's all real work, but yes, I know exactly what you mean.
I don't mean to, yeah, I get that completely. Councilmember Waring.
One last thing on this. I've talked about it before, but I really do believe we need to come up with some sort of signage, marketing. When these men and women pull up in your community, they come there to fix things. In other words, it's good news. Right now, it's almost nondescript. You see the big truck, you see the people, you pass, you go on your way. But we need to let our citizens know how often our men and women around making improvements to various pipes, drainage, etc. Letting them know that, hey, your stormwater funds at work or something like that. I don't have the marketing mind, I got a finance mind, but I'm sure we can get a sound bite on that and put it on a sign or whatever. So when people go to and from there, they'll see our people making improvements in their communities where they need it most. So I think a few dollars worth of marketing go a long way in that regard.
And I will add, Councilman, I think that's a great idea that you had previously as well. So we actually have had our staff working on that the last week, trying to come up with some options and approaches and talking to field operations about what they can move around with them easily. So we are underway on doing that, because I think that really is a good idea to get that word out. What we're doing.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think you are onto something about establishing these districts. I will certainly defer to Ms. Erdina and her department in their analysis on this, but I can tell you from impact fee practice, it's common to establish geographically distinct service areas where you can have different levels of service as a goal. You can have different impact fee amounts, different calculations to address the unique issues presented in each of the different geographically defined areas. But the other side of this is that it sort of functions a little bit like a TIF when you start going in that direction, because in order to meet that that nexus requirement of a fee versus a tax, you got to make sure that money where the increased fees are go back into the area where they're being paid, more or less. But I think it's a very creative idea, to maybe, peg these service areas to basins. I mean, and really start getting our, fee structures aligned with the hydrology of our area. And, to Councilman Waring's point, I mean, if we can really, instill, in the public a very visible presence, working on projects, getting things fixed, improving things at the margins. I really think we can begin to have the sort of paradigm shift around stormwater in this department that I'm very excited to see happen, and we need to have happen in the coming years. So I think we're onto some very exciting concepts, and Matt and his department do such a great job, and I'm certainly on board with doing what we need to do to get them more of the tools and resources they need to get the job done. And I think that the public will be open to this. Again, it's not a tax, it's a fee. You're getting something discrete in return for what you're paying. And there's all kinds of things going on in the world right now, but people recognize stormwater and flooding and the issues that it poses. And I think people would be willing to pay a very small amount more to get more bang for the buck. So that's my take. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Any other general comments? Councilmember Jackson?
I just have a follow-on question to the conversation about the service districts and, assigning the revenues back to the use in a particular district. So would an applicable example of that be then trying to take on the brick arches holistically and, basically establish a fee for whatever route they take throughout the historic part of the peninsula?
That could be an example, sure. Or Central Park drainage basin, or Church Creek drainage basin. Of course, we got the TIF district over there, so it might not be needed over there, but or the medical district, as I first outlined. So yeah, it's something we ought to explore.
And then would we think we could set that up during the 2021 year so we could start to see those fees paid in?
I have no clue about that. Well, Susan do some digging and get back to us. I think the question before us today is whether y'all would advise that we go ahead next year and bump from $10 to $11 on the stormwater fee to allow another $1 million to go to the stormwater department and budget to build capacity and to start building the project pipeline for the future.
Well, I would certainly support that increase.
Matt, can you go back to that other screen where you had the comparison for us one more time?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I do want to just mention from the district perspective, I think utility districts certainly have some value and some approach. But, you do have to remember scale of cost. Stormwater kind of works like community lending right now, where kind of everybody takes their turn in their basin and you raise funding across a large area. It can get a little bit tricky on some projects, and if you end up with like a $5 million project, and you have even 1,000 residents who benefit from that project, you're still looking at raising $5,000 per resident on that project. Just from a perspective of fee structure versus project benefit, it works, but it works on a long scale time frame. So if you were going to set up individual districts, you often set up districts and potentially bond off those districts because the time frame is long. The advantage of kind of going on a community lending basis and kind of having a shared fee is that you basically can pay as you go and you don't have those borrowing costs, because rather than extending your time frame, you're kind of taking the time to go through all the different areas building the work. So it's just a different way to balance costs. I mean, you can certainly bond off the citywide fee as well, which still gives you those interest costs. But I think there is some benefit if there's an unusual area that something different is necessary or different is occurring. I think that's where you really see some benefit, similar to, I think, what Councilman Zappel was talking about with an impact fee, where it's, hey, this is not a traditional project. This is something different or unusual. It really has an additional cost and also value to that area beyond what you would normally see.
So, Mr. Mayor, you wanted to go to $12, you said?
I think
11.
11.
it's,
Why not 12?
Yeah, why not 12? Thank you.
there's
Wait a minute.
some limits to what we might propose, given what our needs are on the general fund budgetary side.
Right. Thank you.
And to do this, on a gradual basis. You build that pipeline, and 2 years from now, you might need another buck because of the actual capital costs of those projects once you've figured them all out and gotten the pipeline in place. But that's when you need more hard dollars for the project construction.
Here, this is Amy. I just want to also remind everybody that we have a drainage fund and the stormwater fund, which is typically for operations. Drainage fund is 4 mils for larger scale projects. So I don't want everybody to think that these are mixed together, because they're 2 separate funds.
Yeah.
Because you're talking a lot about bigger projects and things like that, which are typically paid for out of the drainage fund, not out of stormwater. Stormwater, smaller, operational, that type of thing. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that.
So we appreciate that, Amy, and I think that's right. But I do point out that we had a long list of small projects earlier this year. We weren't able to do but a few of them. And then if I recall from Matt's presentation last time about the maintenance and getting the ditches and the pipes, so many moving through the pipe cleaned out, it's going to take us 5 or 6 years even to make a single pass around all the pipes. So it's clear we have needs there as well on the maintenance.
I'm not disputing the fee increase. I just wanted to remind everybody of the drainage fund as well.
Gotcha. 100 miles of pipes need cleaning. And, there's, as I said, more needs out there than we got funds. So anyway.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that Matt, you made mention about, some of these things pay as you go, and I hear you on that. But while we're in a period of was historically low interest rates, I know we lose some revenue by paying interest on bonding, but when you compare that to the inflationary costs of doing these, highly expensive capitalized projects, waiting for money to come in on an annual basis to do it, I actually think it's much more expedient to go out and get the bond at low interest rates, pay the interest, and get the projects done sooner rather than later. And one example I would bring up is look at that same project on the Forest Park Acres project, where what is it? AT&T is still, I guess they hadn't decided how they're going to move that trunk line or cover the trunk line. We've had our monies ready for that project since 2012. It was in the 2012 drainage bond, the first drainage bond I voted on when I selected the council, and AT&T has held us up on that. What has been our inflationary cost if we had done that project in, let's say, 2013 or 14? Now we're going to be doing the project in 2000, at best 21, maybe 22. What did it cost in 13 or 14? And what does it cost now? And why did we get hold up? Because another utility basically kicked the can down the road for, 7, 8 years. But anyway, while these interest rates are low, as the economy, if they come up with a virus and the economy begins to open and begin to do a little bit better, we're all praying for that, interest rates will rise. And that will take away from our ability to do some of these projects, as I said, sooner rather than later. So I, kind of throw that out. If interest rates were a little bit higher, I'd be quiet. While we got this environment, I think we take advantage of it through bonding. When we can, of course, when we can.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Councilman Waring, observation of the delays that we incur as a result of other utilities not doing what they're supposed to do. Is there a way that they can be charged for our additional costs?
We definitely ought to look into that, especially on that one, man. I mean,
I would
this
think so. I mean, because we're incurring considerable costs as a result of the delays.
Well, let me give you an example, Mr. Mayor. I think originally on that project was supposed to cost $8 million. We ended up spending 11. So.
Yeah. Well, we haven't even started phase 2 yet, but.
Yeah, you're right. But that was an issue on phase 1, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But regardless of the phase, I mean, is it a legal question whether or not we can obligate utility companies that hold up our project? I just think it's a legitimate question.
It is a legitimate question. Probably.
I can jump in for a second if you want on that one. I mean, a lot of that is going to depend on our franchise agreements, and that's something that certainly as those come up for negotiation, it's an important part to include in the negotiations, the requirements for relocation expediency.
You were a bit mumbled.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was saying that a lot of that is handled in the franchise agreements normally, and how you handle utility relocation and expediency of relocation, and that's something that certainly should be a part of the discussion with any utility as franchise agreements are renegotiated.
All right.
And it's not something that we've done in the past with regard to franchise agreements.
Our franchise agreements are a little bit vague on utility requirements for relocation.
I missed that last part. I'm sorry.
It's okay. They're a little bit vague on what the requirements are for relocation.
Can we unveil? Can we sort of challenge it?
As they come up for renegotiation, yes.
Okay. I just think that, if there is a vehicle and if the franchise agreement is that vehicle, then I think that we should start at least talking in that direction as we renegotiate franchise agreements. And perhaps it'll at least give them a little incentive to sort of work with us a little better and save us some money.
Or if they're vague already, interpret them the way that we think it should be.
That's how we do it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we'll certainly consider that when we look at renewal of franchise agreements. So with the telecommunications companies, I don't think our agreements with them are as robust as they are with the energy company because of the FCC regulations and federal authority that the FCC gives a lot of them. We got the same situation with the 5G towers. We can't get any decent fee out of them because the federal government empowers them over our head. Isn't that right, Susan?
That's right, Mayor. And also the arrangements with Comcast and some of the other telecommunication companies are governed by the state act. And so we've got limited abilities there, but we'll definitely look at the issue. And I'll get together with Matt and review, where we might be able to, recover potentially some fees for their delays.
That's right, or set it up so that next time we're in a better position. So maybe we should, unless there's anything further on stormwater, we ought to move along and let Amy update us on tourism. I'll come back to council with a recommendation on this. I must be honest with you. I feel like we need the funds for stormwater on the one hand, but I am sensitive about our needs on the revenue side for the general fund. So I got to weigh that, and then we as a council will have to weigh that as well. Amy, you want to go to tourism next?
Okay, so we're holding on stormwater, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I have draft tourism budgets for you. The state accommodations tax. So I've included my staff included the 2020 original budget, what was amended or what will be amended to, and what we're proposing for 2021. As you can see, no grants because we did not issue out those applications, and we had no intention of doing that this year. We're projecting about a $3.6 million in revenues for 2021. The CVB 30%, that's based on the $3.6 million. We did keep for the 2020, we had talked about a while back, the original budgeted amount for the CVB for that 30% instead of cutting it based on the actual revenue we received in 2020. So that's what we have for the 2020 amended budget. We had talked about that and agreed on that a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when. And then we have the bonds that we pay. We've always paid the one IAM bond, the second $7.5 million bond. We usually pay out a hospitality fee, but as we go through these budgets, you'll see the hospitality fee fund cannot handle a lot of what we used to pay out of that fund with the Gibbs. And basically it's all the things that we have agreements or debt that we have to pay is what our proposed uses are for 2021 accommodations tax fund.
Do you have a screen share on this, Amy?
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I forgot that I wasn't sharing my screen.
No problem.
I thought I was looking at the Emperor's clothes.
Sorry about that. That would probably help you a lot. There it is.
Oh, it was forcing me to really pay attention.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so you see the 2020 amended amount that we kept. That's what I was talking about, the 30% for the CVB, because that's based on the revenue we received. We budgeted $2.3 million originally in the accommodations tax budget for 2020. We just kept it at the same funding level. We had decided to do that to help them get Charleston back on its feet, advertising, etc. But the 2021 is based on the actual revenue that we're projecting. Any questions?
And your revenue projection, is that something that we came up with ourselves, or did the state help us with that, or?
No, we always come up with them ourselves just based on what we receive from the state. And so right now, that's about 47% of 2020 of what we budgeted in 2020. That's about where we are right now, as we're about 45% of our 2020 original budget amount. So that's where we stayed.
Amy?
Yes.
I'm looking at the cultural festivals line. We didn't have anything budgeted at all in the beginning of 2020, or the real budget we budgeted.
Yeah, we did. I could give you that number. I'm sorry, Councilmember Jackson. We moved that above the line because we decided it was kind of silly last year for us to be applying for grants of our own money. So we moved it above the line. So I can get you that information. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was wondering how we supported it.
Probably be about the same amount of every year, pretty much.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Okay.
So Amy, excuse me, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Councilman,
Amy, what you went over before you put this up,
Mm-hmm.
now why don't you give that explanation, what you said on verbally and point to it on this budget.
Okay, so we're proposing 3.6 million for our 2021 budget, state accommodations tax.
Right.
I've included the 2020 original budget and then what we amended it to, because we have to bring you an amended budget as well for 2020 for state accommodations tax.
Right.
And so you see this 30% here for CVB. We originally budgeted $2.3 million based on the revenue we had budgeted for, but as you know, it decreased. So really we would only have to pay them about what we collect. But we had decided collectively a few months ago, if you remember, to pay them the full amount. So we left that alone for 2020. And then the 2021 proposed amount is the amount of the 30% of our projected revenue. Okay. And then everything else is all just things that we have to do. It's debt payments, it's agreements that we have, and then the general fund 5%.
Right.
so
Just-
I would note on here for everyone that as our revenue got cut, so in 2020, we were not able to fulfill the commitment we made for the renovation of the visitor center, and we're not able to do it again in 2021. So we are kicking that can down the road. The Convention and Visitors Bureau has borrowed some money to cover those renovations that are now wrapping up and look beautiful. But we got to come back when our revenue comes back, and remember, we got to pay them back for that renovation, just to let everybody know.
Mr. Mayor, is that a fixed amount, or is that based on some other sources or percentages or something?
That's something we agreed upon
Okay.
with last year.
Okay, as a fixed amount. Right, okay.
Correct. Now, they may come back and ask us for some more because they added some bells and whistles, but we don't have the money to cover it right now, so we got to just wait until it all shakes out. Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of fact, that's the part I was, the extra bells and whistles. I know what you're talking about, the commitment we made, towards that renovation. I don't know whether it was 5 or 6 million, forget now, but in that neighborhood anyway. But, and I've done a couple of tours of the visitor reception center. And one of the things they did that when I was walking through, it brought up to my attention. I just don't remember that being a part of the what we had agreed to do. Let's put it like this: a couple of years ago, was they put a really nice standing seam metal roof on that building, and somebody advanced the expense on that, and I know we wasn't a part of that. So I think that's some of the bells and whistles that we may get included on later on, but. When they made that decision to move forward, I said to myself, well, why didn't anybody tell us? So it's something about construction. When you move forward and create the expense, and when you got a partner in it, I think you ought to discuss that with the partner prior to spending the money. So I hear you on the part with the commitment that we had, but that other part, we might get in a little wrestling match on that, because the state gave them, you may have seen, what was it, an extra $3 or $4 million out of this COVID thing. Obviously, none of that came to us, and we want the CVB to be the best that they can. But I think they now have some decisions to make on how some of those dollars are going to be spent, because we are tightening our belts right now.
Can I just like to add something? So Councilmember Waring, we did have $800,000 for the roof in the original amount. So it was above and beyond. And we have fulfilled our $5.5 million commitment.
We have? Okay. Yes. Well, thank you for that. I didn't realize it. Yeah, I remember the part about the roof. As a matter of fact, I thought it was 900,000, but it was 800,000. So when
I think it was 8. It might have been closer to 9, but it's 8 or 9.
But when I saw that standard seam roof out there, I know I pay for those things. Those things are really expensive. So, but anyway, I think that's a little, be aware that conversation is probably coming.
Understood.
Amy, in case we have public on the line, can you just make it clear the two transfer items under the IM that's debt service, right? We're transferring to
$5
pay
million
debt service.
bond and the $7.5 million bond.
Correct.
And normally the $7.5 million bond, we pay out of hospitality, but we could not do that for 2021. So we had to move it over to accommodations. Any other questions on state accommodations?
All right.
Okay, so moving on to municipal accommodations. Now, I just have the original proposed budget for municipal accommodations. We won't have to bring this back as an amendment because the ordinance states up to, and since we did not spend more than what the up to original ordinance was, we don't have to amend the ordinance, just to let you know that. So we're projecting about $3.6 million for municipal accommodations as well. You know, that's the 1%, 50-50 to capital improvements or to property tax relief. So obviously nothing for capital improvements. Well, just a little bit for capital improvements, I'm sorry. And then 3.3 million for transfers into the general fund for tourism related salaries. This is a little bit higher than what we normally do because we normally transfer more out of hospitality fee. And like I said, hospitality, obviously we're seeing such a big revenue decline there that we use more out of municipal accommodations because we had a healthier fund balance in municipal accommodations for property tax relief. So we're using that to cover some of the general fund tourism related expenses. That makes sense, everybody? And then we have the debt for the energy performance, the Johnson Controls debt, and then the amount for the low battery.
Okay.
Any questions there?
Any questions, anyone?
Okay. Okay, hospitality. I could share if it's, because I had to chop it up because it's such a big budget. So I can share the whole thing if it would be better, or I can just do it piece by piece, whichever you prefer. But revenues, you can see, you know, we normally 17.6 million in 2020, amended it to 11 million, and then proposing 10.25 in 2021. And I'm sure it's somewhat confusing that we're going down in 2021 for our revenues from 2020, but you have to remember we had 2 good months in 2020. So that's why the numbers are a little bit skewed or look a little skewed, in case you had any questions about that. And then the fund balance amount is the amount of fund balance that we're having to use out of hospitality. The fund balance reserves is for projects. Any questions there?
No.
Okay, so all of these are our operating expenses that, you know, we have no choice on at all. So, you know, these are some of we're replenishing the general fund or paying for things right out of the hospitality fee fund for some expenses that we have. We have the Family Circle Cup, which really is a Volvo now, agreement that we have to comply with, the amount to the International African American Museum for operations, Gilliard Management Corporation, that's also an agreement that we have to comply with. We have debt service for the Gilliard operating costs, which you can see we have decreased some since what we normally budget for. Then obviously for the 350th and the visitor center, we don't have anything for those. Mother Emanuel, we had that 2-year commitment to their memorial. So we did the 1 million in 2020. This is the second 1 million in 2021. And then we have the debt service there. You see the 7.5 million that we actually moved to state accommodations tax. And then the other, you know, I don't know that I necessarily need to read all of them, but the Volvo Tennis Center renovation was another commitment that we have for $1 million. So that's about $6 million there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Amy, just on the Gilliard bonds, those bonds are about 5 or 6 years, I think we're into them.
Mm-hmm.
Any chance we can revisit the rates? I mean, are they callable or anything like that on there?
That's just, you see, it's a $76,000, Councilmember Waring, just for the lease purchase on the sound system. That's the only debt that we have
Oh.
for Gailliard.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Good.
All right, any questions on the hospitality budget here?
Okay, so these are the transfers out that we have. So normally you see for the general fund where we cover some of the expenses, salaries and things like that, it's normally 5.35. We had to reduce it down to 3.8, and that's where we use municipal accommodations to cover that difference. And then these are just, we have the capital improvement fund, which we've reduced a lot, Market Street Streetscape, the River Dog Suites, which is an agreement that we have, and then just the ballpark, which is just the maintenance agreement that we have for them as well, or maintenance that we do.
Any questions on any of this?
So
Well,
just going back, that's the amount of fund balance that we had to use right there to make this all work.
And
We
that's,
still have healthy fund balances, so we're comfortable with using those fund balances, just to let you know that. And let's just hope 2022 gets better, or that 2021 is actually better than what we anticipate.
and just to be clear, this is the fund balance of the hospitality fee or fund, not from
Right.
the fund.
Right. And so then I just did a little bit of, well, Kathy did just a look at how this is affecting the general fund. So you can see the decrease is 2.1 million. So normally tourism ticket fee is a little bit higher, $340,000 normally would go to the general fund. Right, for 2021, we're expecting 93. Municipal accommodations, we increased it, a little bit. Hospitality, that had to decrease some because it just can't support it. As you can see, we use over $2 million in fund balance as it is, and then the state accommodations tax. So it's about a $2.1 million effect to the general fund transfers in that we normally do.
So the big thing still is the difference in the, if you look at the 2020 budget of 29 of revenue of almost 29.5 million, and the 2021 estimate of revenue of 15.7 million, not quite a reduction in half, but almost.
Right.
Yeah, that's painful. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yes.
And
Just we were looking at, some of the other festivals and things that have been canceled. Food and Wine is canceled. So we're trying to take all those into consideration as we're trying to, it's not easy to project this revenue out, considering that we really don't know what's going to happen. And especially in those first 4 or 5 months where we do have a lot of events, not knowing for sure if we'll have those, we're just very, very conservative with our numbers.
Yep. Well, I'm hopeful we're going to have a better year than that, but you're right. We can't rely on it. We can't count on it at this point. The impact on our own general fund is substantial. I am concerned, y'all, about the nonprofits and the arts organizations that have come to rely on us, right or wrong, over the years through our sharing of funds with a number of them. And that's just off the table for next year. Y'all know that, right? We don't have the community assistance applications or the art funding applications. And I don't know that everybody out there realizes yet. We'll start getting phone calls soon, about why we're not being able to help them this coming year. But we just don't have the revenue.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, for the new members of council, you might explain a little bit more, that arts application that you were talking about, the amounts approximately that we used to grant out to different organizations that we obviously can't do.
Yeah, she had it on a slide here at the bottom. 2,368,000 was budgeted in 2020, and we help all kinds of organizations with that. And
Right.
20, we cut them back to half of that, less than half of that in 2020, just based upon what came in the door. But we're not proposing any for next year at this point, unless we cut something else.
Right.
And we did we put that on the website and everything, Mayor, back when the applications would normally be put on our website and they would have to apply. We put all that information out for them at that point, back in June.
That's right. But it's really going to start hurting them come first of the year, if not already. Of course, some of them have been eligible for CARES funding and PPP funding, which we were not. So hopefully as many of them as possible took advantage of that.
So
Okay.
any other questions on that? I mean, I guess this is really what our draft tourism budgets will look like when we bring them in December. So if you're all okay, then we'll move forward with this.
Yep.
Okay.
Unless some question or suggestion here.
Okay, and then just other business, after our meeting last week, this is kind of where our general fund enterprise fund budget looks like right now. We have a $5.2 million negative, which that's what we would be using in fund balance from the general fund, just to let you know. I just wanted to show you what the fund balance, because I think we talked about up to 6 last time. So right now we're at 5.2. We would fill that gap with fund balance. And it's compressed. If you want to look at it, in more detail, I can share my other screen, but I just did total revenues and expenditures for the general fund at the top because otherwise it's too big.
Right.
Amy,
Yes.
so at some point in time, we had discussed the percentage of increase of our budget per year. In what was that overall? Was it like a 13% increase per budget year of our total base budget?
You're talking from 19 to 20, what our budget increase was?
Over like the past 4 or 5 years, our budget revenues increased by a certain percentage, and it was a fairly consistent number over time, and you would track that down. I'm sort of asking just sort of off the cuff, but was it like 10 or 12% increase per year?
For revenues only? I'd have to get back to you. I know that our budget has grown between 4 and maybe 8% within those last few years, I think. Usually we look at expenditures. I'd have to go back and give you the revenue numbers. If you want, I can do that for you. Yeah,
I'm just wondering, and I know I'm being overly optimistic with that, but that's certainly not going to hold true for the 2021 year. And I think you had warned us that this is going to be the norm for 2022 as well, right?
Well, I don't think that we'll recover completely in 2022. Based on what we're hearing, it seems like everybody keeps saying it's going to be a 3-year problem, not just a 1-year problem. So I'm expecting 21 and 22 to be pretty tough, if not 23 as well. Yeah,
I think that it's just sort of a good way for us to measure all of this. If we just sort of had a basic number as to how our budget had increased over time.
Okay. How many years do you want? You want 5 or 10?
If you can do 10, that's helpful.
Okay. I'll get that to you.
Okay. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So 5.2 fund balance, and then basically timeline, we're building the budget based on our last meeting. We're going to bring the local option sales tax resolution to the November 24th council meeting. It only needs 1 reading, so we should be fine. It wouldn't need 2 because it's not an ordinance. We'll present basically the draft budget to the ad hoc committee at our meeting next week, which is on Thursday. provide it to full council after that meeting. The budget has to be advertised in the newspaper on November 15th because it's due to you all on the 17th, full council. And so we'll have to send the ad to the paper on the November 10th. And then full council budget workshop is scheduled for November 18th at 3. So I just want to put some of those timelines in there just because, so you understand what we're working with. Because, you know, just having to have that advertisement to the paper kind of makes our window a little short. So that is where we are right now.
Okay.
Have any questions, concerns, comments?
Councilmember Seekings, I see Councilmember Brady is with us. Did you have any questions or comments, council members?
I'm good. Thank you for letting me listen in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was just trying to stay up to date for when what we're going to go over at the budget workshop.
Gotcha. Terrific.
I just have a general question, Mr. Mayor. Is it illegal for Councilmember Gregory to be smoking a cigarette while we have a budget meeting?
Definitely.
I think a fine should at least be.
Yelling at you and he's muted.
There's some city ordinance on that. I think smoking during a meeting. I'm sure there was a regulation about that.
That ranks right up there with using profanity, man. Come on, you got to find.
Well, at least I got finished by 4:30 for him anyway.
You did.
I did.
Man, in fact, I got a hard 4:30. I got to get on.
All right, I think we're wrapping up. Anybody
Great.
got anything else for us? If not, we'll see you one more time with an ad hoc meeting next week for the
You just send the timeline screen to us, Amy, so we can have that in our calendars.
Sure, I
Hey
can.
guys, yeah, please forgive my cigarette. I'm in the car, okay? I'm sorry about this cigarette. I thought I was off. Video was off.
All right.
I'm trying to make my 4:30, okay?
Okay.
People have been caught on Zoom doing worse.
I heard.
All right, that's enough. We're going to adjourn this meeting now.
All right. Hey, see y'all later.
You guys take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all. Great work, everybody.
Thank you.